Growing up, our home felt more like a quiet courtroom than a place of comfort. My father, a respected college professor, enforced discipline with an iron will. My sister Sarah was the model daughter, polite, studious, and obedient in every way. And I tried to be like her. I really did. "Lily, don't slouch," Dad would say sharply at the dinner table. "You're a young lady. Act like one." I'd nod quickly, afraid to disappoint him, trying my best to meet his expectations. I wasn't rebellious. I just wanted to be accepted. Mom didn't shout, but her silence could be just as cutting. One raised eyebrow, a disapproving glance at my skirt, or a new friend, and I'd feel the shame settle in. "Think of our reputation," she'd whisper. I followed every rule until Frank came along. I was 16, quiet and naive. He was 19, charming and dangerously convincing. He made me feel seen, special. I mistook his attention for love. We kept our relationship hidden, meeting in parking lots, sneaking phone calls late at night. I thought I was in love. I dreamed of college, independence, and maybe a future with Frank. But looking back, I see now. I was just an easy target for someone who knew how to play me. But life had other plans. Cruel, unexpected ones. A few months after my 18th birthday, I began waking up nauseous nearly every morning. I told myself it was nerves. Finals were approaching, and I'd always gotten anxious before big exams. But deep down, something didn't feel right. I can still picture it clearly. The flickering fluorescent lights of a grimy gas station bathroom, my hands shaking as I held the pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. Positive. The air left my lungs. I wandered through the next few days in a fog. How could this be happening? I tried to call Frank a dozen times, but my fingers froze every time I hit dial. What would he say? Would he even care? Eventually, I knew I couldn't keep stalling. We agreed to meet at our usual place, an old, secluded park where no one would see us. The trees felt like silent witnesses to what I was about to say. Frank greeted me with that smug grin of his, like nothing in the world could shake him. But his face shifted the moment he saw mine. "Lily? What's going on?" he asked, stepping closer. I stepped back. "I'm pregnant," I said, voice barely above a whisper. Silence swallowed the space between us. His face twisted, first shock, then denial. "You're sure?" he muttered, as if hoping I'd say it was just a scare. I nodded, blinking back tears. 3 tests, all the same result. He ran both hands through his hair and looked away. When he turned back, his voice was ice. "Then you have to end it. Get an abortion. We're just kids, Lily. A baby would destroy everything." My stomach turned. Frank, the boy I trusted, the one I thought cared about me, just tossed my world aside like it meant nothing. "Leave," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Don't ever come near me again." Without a single word, he turned and walked away. Just like that, I was alone, with nothing but fear, shame, and a growing life inside me. Facing my parents felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I waited until after dinner, when Dad was absorbed in the evening paper, Mom quietly knitting, and Sarah sitting nearby like some silent judge. I need to talk to you," I said, barely audible. Dad slowly lowered the newspaper, suspicious eyes locking on mine. "What is it now, Lily?" I inhaled sharply. "I'm pregnant." The silence cracked open like thunder. Dad's face flushed crimson. He roared, about disgrace, failure, how I'd shame the family. His voice boomed through the walls like judgment itself. Mom broke down instantly, sobbing. "What will the neighbors say?" Sarah just stared at me like I was something dirty on the floor. Silent, judgmental. "You're getting an abortion," Dad snapped after his shouting subsided. "We'll handle it quietly. No one will ever have to know what you did." I didn't want to do it, but after days of emotional warfare, I found myself in a cold, white clinic. Mom and Sarah sat on either side of me, like guards escorting a criminal. The doctor looked over my file, lips pressed tight. Her eyes softened as she met mine. "Lily," she said, voice calm but firm. I need you to understand something. Based on your medical history, an abortion could permanently damage your ability to conceive. You may never have children again. My heart dropped. Never have children again? Suddenly, everything became terrifyingly clear. No, I whispered at first, then louder. I'm not going through with it. I'm keeping my child. Mom gasped like I'd slapped her. Sarah scoffed loudly, but I didn't move. No one said a word during the drive. The moment we stepped inside, Dad was waiting. Well? He asked, sharp and cold. She refused, Mom hissed. Ungrateful, after everything we've sacrificed. Dad's face went purple. You ungrateful. He stopped himself, exhaled slowly, and said in a low, final tone, get your things. You're out. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a daughter anymore. Mom didn't flinch. You heard him. Leave. Sarah folded her arms and stared at the wall as if I didn't exist. My vision blurred with tears as I stuffed clothes into a bag. When I reached the front door, Dad spoke one last time. Don't come back. Ever. You're dead to us. Then the door slammed behind me. That slam echoed through me. It wasn't just a door, it was the end. I was alone, 18 pregnant, and thrown to the street. Desperate and shaking, I pulled out my phone and called the only person who'd ever shown me quiet kindness. Aunt Linda. She and Uncle Bob lived far away and barely spoke to my parents. Lily, sweetheart, what's happened? She asked softly. I broke down and told her everything. Frank, the baby, my parents. Silence. Then, where are you? She asked. Out front, they threw me out. Another pause. Stay there, we're on our way. The ride felt endless, but somewhere along the way I stopped shaking. Their house wasn't big, but it felt safe. Aunt Linda pulled me into a hug, then bustled around the kitchen like I was her own child. You're too thin, she muttered. Sit. Eat. Uncle Bob gently took my bag and led me to a cozy room down the hall. It's simple, he said, but it's yours now. The walls were pale yellow. The quilt smelled like lavender. It's perfect, I said, voice cracking. The days blurred into checkups, paperwork, and long talks around the kitchen table about college, parenting, and what came next. One evening, Aunt Linda looked at me gently. Lily, we've talked. We want to help you go to college. I blinked, stunned. Really? I asked. Uncle Bob nodded. We saved for a family we never had, but maybe we were saving for you all along. My throat tightened. After everything, the idea of college had felt like a fairy tale. But they made it real. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Just say yes. Aunt Linda smiled. One mistake doesn't erase your whole future. So, I enrolled in the local community college. Business management. It was the first step toward building a life for two. Juggling lectures, checkups, and a growing belly wasn't easy, but I was driven in a way I'd never been before. I took a job waiting tables at a local diner. Maria, the owner, knew I was pregnant, and she didn't flinch. She just asked, when can you start? The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to start a small savings jar for the baby and help Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob with groceries and bills. The day my son came into the world, everything changed. I was exhausted, trembling. But the moment I held him, tiny and perfect in my arms, I felt a kind of love I never knew existed. Aunt Linda sobbed quietly, clutching Uncle Bob's arm as they hovered nearby, glowing like first-time grandparents. Have you picked a name? Aunt Linda whispered, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. I looked at him, his tiny chest rising and falling. Daniel, I breathed, because no one else gets to judge me anymore. Because this little life in my arms was worth every sacrifice. Motherhood was chaos, textbooks, baby bottles, late nights. Sometimes I wondered, did Mom ever miss me? Did Sarah feel anything when she found out? But those thoughts passed. I had a real family now. One lazy afternoon, as Daniel napped beside me, I scrolled through Instagram, and nearly dropped my phone. It was a post from Sarah. Over the moon to be engaged to my best friend, Frank. The caption hit like a punch to the stomach. There they were, smiling, carefree. Sarah wrapped around Frank like he was the love of her life. My Frank, Daniel's father, like they hadn't betrayed anyone, like I'd never existed. Fury, grief, betrayal. It all surged inside me, but then I looked at Daniel, his little giggle, his messy curls, and I knew I had everything they'd never understand. Time raced forward. Baby milestones, midterms, spilled milk, and sleepless nights. My final semester nearly broke me. Double course load, late shifts at the diner, and a toddler who thought sleep was optional. Graduation day arrived, sunny and unreal. I scanned the rows of chairs until I saw them. Aunt Linda clutching tissues, Uncle Bob waving like a proud dad. Daniel sat high on Uncle Bob's shoulders, tiny fists pumping with excitement every time he spotted me. Later, at the tiny party Aunt Linda threw with paper hats and lemonade, Maria, my boss, caught my elbow. "Got a minute?" she said, her eyes bright. "I need a new manager, and I want it to be you." "Me?" I laughed. "I've barely kept my life together, let alone a business." She rolled her eyes. "You're already doing half the job. You kept this place running, dealt with chaos, trained newbies, and did it all while raising a kid. That's the kind of leadership I want." It felt like breathing for the first time in years. A real salary, predictable hours, a chance to build something for Daniel and me. The next few years flew by. I dove headfirst into management, ordering, hiring, spreadsheets, profit margins. I wanted to be great, not just good, great. Daniel started school, a ball of energy and endless questions. He loved books, baseball, and helping me count the money at work. One Saturday at a Little League game, Daniel's team played against a kid named Michael. I noticed his dad in the stands, quiet, kind smile, worn-out baseball cap. That was Tom. He laughed at something Daniel said, and I found myself smiling back. There was something steady about him. "Just the two of you?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, his mom died when he was still in diapers." "That's heartbreaking," I said. "Must be a lot." He gave a half shrug. "We do okay. You?" "Single mom. Apparently it's printed on my forehead," I joked. We took things slow. Neither of us was in a rush. But over time, Tom became part of our routine. School pickups, Sunday pancakes, bedtime stories. And Daniel? He loved Tom. One evening, while the boys played tag in the yard, Tom knelt beside me and pulled out a ring. No speeches, just, "I love you. Marry me?" And I said yes. The ceremony was simple. Just love, family, and mismatched chairs in Tom's sister's garden. Daniel walked me down the aisle with pride. Aunt Linda wept openly, her smile brighter than the sun. Life with Tom, Daniel, and Michael found a beautiful rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. 2 years after our wedding, our family grew again. On a sunlit spring morning, Emily came into the world, her first cry like music. Holding her in that quiet hospital room, surrounded by Tom's steady hand, Daniel's beaming grin, and Michael's soft curiosity, I felt whole in a way I never had. Daniel, Emily, and Michael, one born of me, one born to Tom, and one born of our love. Blood didn't matter. They were mine. One evening, while Aunt Linda helped with homework and bedtime chaos, a sharp voice on the TV made us all freeze. There he was, my father, grinning like a king at a podium, crowds cheering. "John Williams declares run for mayor," scrolled across the screen. My stomach turned. I hadn't seen him in over a decade. But there he was, aged but unchanged, still wearing that same iron-willed glare. "Family values," he said into the camera, as if the words weren't poison in his mouth. Aunt Linda exploded. "Lying hypocrites," she hissed, her hands shaking. I looked at her. "What are you talking about?" She didn't blink. "They buried more than just your mistakes, Lily. Long before you or Sarah were born, there was a boy. He was your brother, she said quietly. Born without legs. And his face, misshapen, unrecognizable. They left him at the hospital like he was disposable. They said he'd ruin their reputation, that no one could ever know. So they abandoned him, just like they abandoned you. I felt like the ground shifted beneath me. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked, barely above a whisper. She wiped her eyes. Because I already saw what they did to you, honey. I thought the truth would crush you. I didn't know it might set you free. That night, I barely slept. After tucking Emily in, I turned to Tom and whispered, I need to find him. He didn't hesitate. Then we will. After weeks of silence, the phone rang. We found him, the investigator said, and you won't believe what he's become. My brother, his name was James, was a published author, father of 2, husband to a kind woman, raised by people who saw value where our parents saw shame. When we met, I cried. His face bore the scars of rejection. His jaw was twisted, his smile lopsided, but his eyes, they were mine. He pulled me into a hug. I've always wondered, he whispered. I dreamed of a sister, but never thought one would show up in real life. We made up for lost time fast. Picnics, game nights, our kids playing together like they'd always been cousins. His wife, coincidentally also named Sarah, had a warm laugh and an open heart. Their kids blended right in with ours. It had been 2 decades since I was thrown out into the night. Life hadn't been easy, but it had been real. Daniel, now 19, had just left for college with a baseball scholarship in hand. He was everything I'd hoped for, and more. One quiet Sunday, while sipping coffee and scrolling headlines, I froze. My father's face stared back at me from the screen. Mayor John Williams, champion of family values. I almost choked on my drink. Against my better judgment, I hit play. There he was, still smug, preaching about integrity and unity, words that meant nothing from his lips. Then came the question, tell us about your family. He tilted his head, slipped into performance mode. Just one daughter now, Sarah. She's our heart. We lost 2 others. It was devastating, he said, voice trembling just enough for the cameras. My hands clenched. My face burned. They had made martyrs of themselves while throwing 2 of their children to the wolves. Just as my fury boiled over, my phone lit up. James. You won't believe this, he said, excited. Book signing, next week, in your hometown. You in? I smiled slowly. I'll be there, I said. And in that moment, I knew. Truth was about to walk back into town. The next week, I stepped back into the city I once called home. Every corner brought a memory. Birthday balloons, slammed doors, whispered shame. But I wasn't here to remember. I was here to confront. The event was hosted in the city's fanciest hotel. Chandeliers, velvet curtains, the whole show. James wasn't kidding. The ballroom was packed. Local politicians, business elites, reporters. It felt like a reunion I never asked for. In the front row sat the architects of my pain. Dad, now Mayor Williams, stoic and polished. Mom, as always, draped in pearls and pride. And Sarah, perfectly poised like nothing had ever happened. They hadn't noticed me. I slipped into a seat near the back, pulse racing like a war drum in my chest. James entered the stage to thunderous applause, his wheelchair gliding like royalty. He wore calm like armor. He spoke of resilience, of overcoming, and from the front row, my parents nodded like strangers, offering sympathy to a story they'd written in cruelty. I was born without legs, James said, voice clear and steady. My face was different. My parents chose shame over love. They left me at the hospital and never looked back. I scanned my father's face. Not a flicker, just the familiar politician's mask, measured concern, detached interest. Not even a crack. I was lucky, James said. Another family saw what mine didn't. They raised me with love, and I became more than a secret to hide. Still, he added, I always wondered, who were they? And why wasn't I enough for them? The ballroom was hushed. You could hear hearts beating. I stood near the edge, breath caught in my throat. I knew what was coming. Then came the moment. James smiled, eyes gleaming. But there's more. I found someone. My sister Lily. She's here today. He turned toward me. Come on up here, Lil. Gasps echoed as I stepped forward. Familiar eyes widened. This was the girl they thought had disappeared. But the front row? That was a masterpiece of shock. Mom clutched her pearls. Dad turned pale. Sarah stared like she'd seen a ghost. They knew. The mask was cracking. The truth had arrived in heels. They stood ready to flee, but I'd waited too long for this. Don't leave, I said loud and clear. You always ran from the truth. Not tonight. Trapped like deer in headlights, they slowly sat, the room now a jury. I stepped to the mic. You all knew the Williams family, but what you didn't know is the damage done behind those perfect curtains. And so, I told them everything. They left James to die, because he wasn't perfect, and then pretended he never existed. When I was 18 and pregnant, they didn't hug me. They handed me a list of clinics, even when doctors said it might destroy my ability to ever have kids again. I said no, so they said get out. I was tossed like garbage, to protect their precious image. The crowd buzzed. People gasped. Some turned to glare at the front row. My parents? They looked small. They preach family values, I said, voice cracking. But they abandoned 2 children and lied. For image, for votes, for pride. Chaos erupted. Voices rose. Cameras clicked. Reporters scrambled. The story of the year wasn't a book. It was the truth finally being spoken aloud. Amid the chaos, I met my father's eyes. The giant of my childhood now looked tiny, shriveled, powerless. Mom wept quietly, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Sarah sat like a statue, staring, trembling, silent. The fallout came fast. Local headlines, national headlines. Mayor's hidden children exposed. The man who once preached family first was exposed as a fraud. His empire of image collapsed in a single broadcast. He stepped down within days. Health reasons, the statement said. But everyone knew he was running from shame, not illness. Even the university cut ties. One day he was Professor Williams. The next, he was scrubbed from the faculty page. But even in disgrace, some lines remained unbroken. Sarah picked her side. She refused to admit the truth, even when it stood before her in flesh and blood. She called me once. Just once. You destroyed this family, she spat. You're dead to us. Don't ever call again. But life wasn't done surprising me. A few days later, a number I hadn't seen in decades flashed on my phone. Frank, my ex, Daniel's biological father, Sarah's husband. Lily, he said awkwardly. I've been thinking about the past. Sarah and I can't have kids. And I was wondering, maybe we could try again? We share a son after all. I laughed, sharp, bitter. You left me, Frank. You married my sister. You vanished. Now, because life didn't go your way, you want a second chance? Number Lily, please. No, Frank, I have love. I have a real family. You're not part of that story. Not now, not ever. I ended the call with a strange calm in my chest. Closure. I didn't even know I'd been waiting for it. The next surprise? His parents. Lily? The voice trembled. It's Martha, Frank's mom. We just found out about Daniel. Is he really our grandson? My heart ached listening to her. They were told I'd had an abortion, that I'd run off. They never knew Daniel existed. The lies had spread wider than I'd imagined. If there's a chance we could meet him, she whispered, we'd be so grateful, but only if it's okay. I paused. They hadn't betrayed me. They were deceived, just like I had been. All right, I said gently. I'll talk to him. If he's ready, we'll reach out. When they met, the room filled with tears. And healing. They brought photo albums. He brought questions. It was messy. And beautiful. And that's how I found out that Frank lied about me having an abortion. What a jerk. Anyway, my Daniel, kind as always, welcomed them like he'd known them forever. Things found a new rhythm again. Not perfect, not quiet, but full of warmth. James and his kids became constants. Movie nights, backyard BBQs, holidays full of noise and second chances. Aunt Linda became the grandmother of them all. Uncle Bob read bedtime stories and fixed every loose drawer in the house. And my parents? Sarah? They vanished, somewhere far, running from the truth they couldn't rewrite. Sometimes, I pitied them. But mostly, I felt peace. Because I'd told the truth. And that truth had set me free.